So a little bit of time has passed now since the Tyreek Hill trade, and one thing that has happened since then is the NFL draft, where most of, or really all of what the Chiefs got back was draft picks. So I figured, let's do a kind of who won the trade thing retrospective a little bit, because we're only a month away from what happened. But now that we know a little bit more information, let's kind of look at what the actual pieces are, and that can, I think, help us visualize a little bit more what the trade actually was and who won and who lost. So first, this is what the Chiefs gave up, and it's worth mentioning that all they gave up was Tyreek Hill. The other two picks on there are picks that they would eventually give up due to trades, because what would end up happening is, the Chiefs get all of these draft picks. Well, they didn't pick, in their exact spot each time. In fact, they 3 times traded with the New England Patriots. I didn't realize that they traded with them that many times, but that's what happened. So they also ended up giving up pick 94 and pick 121, which was a Dolphins pick anyway. So they also gave up pick 94, essentially, along with Tyreek Hill. That's what they lost. Meanwhile, they gained Trent McDuffie and Sky Moore. Those were the 2 players that they drafted with those picks. They also gained 2023 4th and a 2023 6th, along with getting pick 158. Again, that's just due to all of the trading back and forward stuff. So that alone, you're probably sitting here and saying, yeah, that really feels like Tyreek Hill was better than Trent McDuffie and Sky Moore. And, I like both of those guys as prospects. I believe I had first-round grades on both of those guys. I think they're both very good. I can't remember. Sky Moore at least had as a top 50 prospect, I'm sure of. They're both very talented prospects and could potentially be good starters. But neither one of them are going to be a guy who I had as my number 1 wide receiver in football, Tyreek Hill. So that's definitely a big downgrade, but of course, it's not that simple. It's not just the draft picks you get for Kansas City, it's also the cap space you cleared up. Both of those 2 things are true. Tyreek Hill is now getting paid $30 million a year, and let's just say, for example, that if the Chiefs wanted to keep him, they would have had to give him a contract like that one. In the offseason, the Chiefs would eventually pay Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Justin Reid roughly $10 million a year each. Now, it's a little bit weird with Smith-Schuster because his contract is technically a $3 million deal, but with $7 million in incentives, and all of the incentives are like super easy for him to get. Like, one is catch a touchdown pass, another is get over 130 receiving yards. So unless he gets hurt for the whole year, he's going to be making $10 million a year. That's more so just a way that they can push some of the salary onto the following season. Of course, it's also worth mentioning Justin Reid was signed before they got rid of Tyreek Hill. So it's not exactly fair to say that these would have been the 3 guys that they would have lost had they kept Tyreek Hill, but it's not horrible to say that either. I mean, it's still the same cap space. So I think for this exercise, I'm going to put these 3. What realistically would have happened is it wouldn't have been Justin Reid who goes. They would have just cut somebody. Maybe they wouldn't have been able to sign Orlando Brown, but then they would have still had, $7 million more to spend somewhere else. So because they could have gotten rid of Brown for no cap penalty. But regardless, it would have been very complicated. So to simplify things, we'll just say that it's these 3 guys. And so with that being said, what does the full trade really amount to then? This is essentially the full trade. They lost Tyreek Hill plus pick 94, which actually ended up being Matt Corral. So they wouldn't have drafted Matt Corral, but they would have gotten whatever value they wanted with pick 94, whether that's a trade back or selecting a player there, or maybe they wanted a backup quarterback. I don't know. But I doubt he's going to compete with Patrick Mahomes. That's, sorry to all the Matt Corral fans. But they gained Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Reid, Trent McDuffie, Sky Moore, a 4th, a 6th, and pick 158. Pick 158 ended up going to the Seahawks. They got Tyreek Smith. There was more trades involved. I'm not going to get that far down the rabbit hole. You get the idea. With that, a pick that's not even top 150. All the other stuff, though, that's essentially what it was, which is some interesting talent here. I mean, for one thing, the Chiefs got basically an entire receiving corps: Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And they also got 2 players who can really help their secondary in Justin Reid and Trent McDuffie. Typically, with a trade like this, there's always the potential for it to go even better if you're the team that gets more draft picks, right? Because you have the chance of like, hey, if Sky Moore ends up being the next Tyreek Hill, well, then this is a massive win, right? Which there is a greater than 0% chance that happens. If Trent McDuffie ends up being the next Richard Sherman, then this obviously is a win. And there's a greater than 0% chance that happens. But of course, when you're making decisions, you don't say, well, what has the best potential outcome? You say, okay, what's the most likely outcome? And then, what are the chances of the best potential outcome? All of that stuff. It's a math problem essentially, that we all just do in our heads sometimes without realizing it. What is the most likely outcome for the Kansas City Chiefs here? They're probably going to be a more complete team, which is definitely something they needed to do in this offseason when they were, a real issue with their team was they really struggled at, with a number 2 option. I mean, obviously Kelsey was awesome, but he is still a tight end, technically, on paper. And you have, Tyreek Hill, and after that, you didn't have much else. So really a third option would probably be the way to do it. And this move did accomplish that mission. Yes, you lost your first option, but, Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Sky Moore should all be able to do their role very well. And then you also helped your secondary, which desperately needed improvement from last season. And you still have a couple of picks to go off of as well, sort of later picks. Nothing in the top 100, but still some picks that there's still some additional value there, although you lost the pick 94. So maybe you can call that a wash if you want to. But then it comes to the question of what do you think is the better option? The way I always view drafting is when you're drafting someone, you're getting them for 4 years. Because after 4 years, you have to pay them, which you can get free agents for. So unless it's a superstar, which those guys don't hit the open market, right? Like a star quarterback doesn't hit the open market. And some, stars in certain positions, at least are rare to hit the open market, like a Tyreek Hill, doesn't typically hit the open market too often. So if you can get one of those, all-time greats, then okay, well, there you go. But realistically, you're not getting an all-time great or even an all-pro late in the first round. It doesn't happen too often. It happens, but realistically, that's not an expectation. So what you should be expecting for is someone who's going to help you for 4 years. And I just feel like Tyreek Hill would help the Chiefs more for the next 4 years than even all of the players that they got. I don't think it's a huge jump, actually. I do get the logic behind why they wanted to do it. Because, again, when you're getting that many players, there's just a lot of room that they can add value to. But I think a star wide receiver, in my estimate, can be worth around 2 wins. So you have to make up those 2 wins with, 5 players. But what is that? 0.4 wins per player above replacement. That's still a decent amount for non-quarterbacks. It's possible they can do it. I think that, they could get relatively close, and you still have some extra pieces. And of course, the flip side is there still is the higher upside with this move. I still think I roll with Tyreek Hill and I do what I can. That being said, I do think that Kansas City did exactly what they should have done once they traded Tyreek Hill. I would have kept Tyreek Hill. I just think he's that kind of talent. And maybe they don't view wide receivers as highly as I do, in which case it starts to make more sense. But or at least a star wide receiver. For me personally, I do think that they've done a great job since the Tyreek Hill trade of making sure they said, okay, let's get a complete receiving core. Let's get guys who can legitimately play. Let's work on one of our biggest weaknesses, which is basically just defense in general, outside of a few obvious exceptions. And like the George Karlaftis pick was a great pick. That's not included in here because they already had that selection anyways. But that's a great job of let's try to build depth. Let's try to build, get guys who can legitimately play. And I do think that they've done a very good job at doing that. So the team building aspect of it, which is what's, I think, fascinating to me, I just don't agree with. I don't think you trade someone who, he's got 4 years in him. His contract is for 4 years. So if we talk about 4 years, what's going to help you more? I think Tyreek Hill would help you more. That's how I view it. But I could be wrong. There's definitely a possibility where this receiving core going from, at times streaky, I think, to really good, this could be a good thing. And of course, the flip side is, does Tyreek Hill have 4 years left in him? Because if he only has 2 years left in him, this becomes a great trade for Kansas City. If Tyreek Hill has 2 elite years and then falls off, this is a great trade for the Chiefs. And the reason why I would say that is because the Chiefs Super Bowl window is when they have Mahomes, right? So it's how do you maximize this window and make it as long as possible? So because of that, you're okay with having a small step back for 2 years if it gives you a big step forward for the next 2. The question is, when is Tyreek Hill going to fall off? And that's really, I think, what it comes down to is that's kind of what makes the trade either work or not work is how many years do you think Hill has left? That's how I view it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.